and welcome. I am Serenity Howout. I am a master's student in the General Psychology program at the University of Arizona Global Campus. I'm a kindergarten teacher of 5 years who has worked with special educators to develop IEPs for my students, including those with autism spectrum disorder. This evening, I will be presenting on autism spectrum disorder. We will dive into examine the history of ASD, how it is studied and diagnosed, and the role the brain, neurotransmitters, and other biological symptoms play in ASD. Additionally, we will discuss lifespan implications, treatments, and more. I am honored to be presenting to fellow educators, as it is vital for you to understand how and why ASD occurs. Educators need to understand ASD symptoms so they can identify early indicators, which will allow for timely intervention and support. Additionally, educators can implement effective behavior management strategies and develop a safe and inclusive environment where all students can thrive. Understanding and recognizing the parts of the nervous system that are involved in ASD also serves as a reminder that these students do not choose their social impairments or restrictive repetitive behaviors. They did not choose to have ASD, but we as educators choose to develop interventions to best support the students so they can thrive. Although ASD varies from person to person, research has identified common brain abnormalities in areas such as the amygdala, orbital frontal cortex, cerebellum, Wernicke's area, and neurotransmitters such as serotonin and GABA, which attribute to the ASD symptoms of difficulties in communicating and interacting with others and displaying restrictive and repetitive behaviors. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects how individuals behave, learn, communicate, and interact with other people. Autism is considered a spectrum disorder due to the vast variation in the severity and types of symptoms individuals experience. Looking into the history, early scientists described autism as a form of schizophrenia that involved fantasies, the detachment from reality, and hallucinations. In 1943, Kanner used the term autism to describe children who struggled with change in routines, social interactions, and to relate to others. Additionally, the children had symptoms such as obsessiveness, echolalia or repeating words, sensitivity to stimuli, good memory, and food resistance. In the 1960s, scientist Bettelheim stated that cold parenting caused autism, and he believed autistic children should be removed from their parents' care. But other psychologists, such as Rimland, denied and disproved these claims, identifying neurological factors involved in autism. Educational strategies and interventional programs, such as ABA, were researched, designed, and implemented in order to support students and children with ASD. In the 1980s and 90s, autism research spiked, and researchers continue to find links between genetic or neural abnormalities, environmental factors, and autism. In 1994, the DSM-4 categorized autism as a spectrum, including autism and pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, Asperger's disorder, childhood disintegrative disorder, and Rett syndrome. In 2013, the DSM-5 stated children must have persistent deficits in areas of social communication and restricted and repetitive behaviors in order to receive a diagnosis of ASD. Additionally, the DSM-5 declared those diagnosed with autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, or pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified using the DSM-4 would now be given the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Finally, researchers are still developing tools to screen for ASD, such as the modified checklist for autism in toddlers revised with follow-up. Scientists and researchers use numerous strategies when studying ASD, including neuroimaging, such as MRIs and fMRIs. Additionally, researchers utilize animal models, such as genetically modified mice, to identify neurobiological relationships to ASD. Genetic testing, behavioral and cognitive studies, epidemiology, and longitudinal studies have also been used in studying ASD. Types, diagnosis, and risk factors. There are various types of ASD, including autistic disorder, Asperger's syndrome, childhood disintegrative disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder. ASD symptoms typically appear by the age of 2. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends children to be screened for developmental delays during their regular wellness checks and an ASD specified screener at the ages of 18 and 24 months. Various screeners and diagnostic tools often include the caregiver's description and the professional's observations. Possible tools include the Autism Diagnosis Interview revised, Modified Checklism for Autism in Toddlers revised with follow-up, Childhood Autism Rating Scale, and Gilliam Autism Rating Scale, 2nd edition. If the child demonstrates developmental differences in functioning or behavior on the screening, they are often then referred for additional assessments. Healthcare providers who are experienced in diagnosing ASD work together to conduct a diagnostic evaluation. Possible team members include developmental behavioral pediatricians, child psychologists or neurologists, speech-language pathologists, educational specialists, and occupational therapists. Once referred, the diagnostic evaluation often consists of neurological and medical examinations, assessments of speech, language, and cognitive abilities, observations of behavior, conversations with caregivers, assessments of age-appropriate skills, and questionnaires regarding family history. Following the DSM-5, a patient must have recurring deficits in 3 areas of social communication and interaction, in addition to at least 2 out of 4 restricted or repetitive behaviors, in order to be diagnosed with ASD. Scientists are not certain what causes ASD. However, research has found that genes and the environment can play a role in ASD. Some risk factors include having older parents or siblings with ASD, being born extremely underweight, and having specific genetic conditions such as Down syndrome or Fragile X syndrome. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, about 1 in 36 children had autism among their sample in 2020. In recent years, the prevalence of reported autism has been on the rise, which is why it is essential for educators to understand and be familiar with ASD. Key behaviors and symptoms. ASD impacts every individual differently. Some people experience numerous and various symptoms, while others only experience a few symptoms. Individuals with ASD experience deficits in social communication and interaction. Behaviors include difficulty making and maintaining eye contact, sharing an interest with others, engaging in imaginative play, making and maintaining friends, interpreting theirs and others' emotions, understanding others' viewpoints, holding a conversation, appropriately responding to stimuli, and displaying facial expressions. Additionally, individuals may have an unusual tone, be slow to or not respond to when called, use gestures or movements that do not match the situation or what is being said, use scripted speech, and take abstract ideas literally. Additionally, those with ASD also demonstrate restricted repetitive patterns of behavior. This includes being overly interested in one specific topic, such as numbers or cars, repeating specific or unusual behaviors, and the repetition of speech. Those with ASD may be insistent on sameness, meaning they become upset when there is a slight change in routine. They may also struggle with transitions. For example, an individual may have to eat the same food each day, develop greeting rituals, or take the same path each day. Those with ASD may be hyper or hyposensitive to sensory input such as sound, light, clothing, or temperature. For example, they may demonstrate excessive touching or smelling of objects and show adverse responsive to textures or sounds. There are various other symptoms that those with ASD experience. Some include delayed language, movement, learning, and cognitive skills. Additionally, those with ASD may demonstrate a lack of fear or more fear than typical. They are impulsive, display hyperactive and inattentive behavior, and may struggle with anxiety or stress. Individuals may also experience unusual moods or emotional reactions, epilepsy, gastrointestinal issues, and unusual sleeping and eating habits. It is essential as educators to be aware of these symptoms to pinpoint possible signs of autism in the classroom. We will now begin to examine how the brain plays a role in ASD. The amygdala is an almond-shaped structure that is located in the temporal lobe. The amygdala is an essential region of the limbic system. This region is responsible for processing information between the hypothalamus and the prefrontal temporal association cortices. Additionally, the amygdala regulates important emotions, including aggression, anxiety, stress, and fear. Without the amygdala, an individual would not be able to learn through fear. It also allows for conditioning through the use of stimuli such as drugs, food, and sex. Finally, the amygdala plays a key role in regulating social cognition and emotional memory. This region is responsible for acquiring and consolidating memories that evoke emotional responses. Research has identified various amygdala abnormalities in those with ASD. During development, the amygdala demonstrates unusual patterns of growth. By the age of 4, the amygdala is larger. One study found that in early childhood, those with a larger right amygdaloid predicted more deficits in the child's communication and social interaction skills. During adolescence and adulthood, the amygdala's volume is similar to a neurotypical brain or smaller to a minor degree and has fewer neurons. Those in adulthood who have smaller amygdaloid were more likely to experience social impairments. Hypoactivity was also found in the amygdala for those with ASD. During social tasks such as face processing or determining the emotional state of an individual in a photograph, the amygdala activity was reduced to those with ASD. These irregularities of the amygdala are believed to play a role in the social and emotional difficulties that those with ASD experience. Those difficulties include managing and appropriately expressing emotions, interpreting others' facial expressions or feelings, interpreting social cues or speech, forming and maintaining relationships, and responding fittingly to various stimuli. Those with ASD demonstrate an impaired theory of mind or the ability to understand and attribute mental states to themselves and others, which may be due to the irregularities in the amygdala. Next, we have the orbitofrontal cortex, or the OFC. The OFC cortex is located in the anterior ventral part of the frontal lobe. This region of the brain is responsible for association learning or interpreting the value of a reinforcer, including touch, taste, texture, and facial expression. It links these primary reinforcers with various stimuli, generating representations of anticipated reward values for visual, auditory, and abstract cues. The OFC is responsible for developing outcome expectancies that can be used to guide behavior. This region combines emotions, thoughts, and physical responses into an organized, goal-directed behavior. Additionally, the OFC guides an individual to consider the potential outcomes or consequences of a behavior. The OFC also informs other regions of the need to not act on impulses or to suppress a behavior. Research has found that those with ASD have a hypoactive OFC. There have also been volume abnormalities linked to ASD. In one study, the OFC volume was found to be reduced. Additionally, more gray matter volume was present. The abnormalities in the OFC may account for the restricted and repetitive behaviors, including impulsivity or the inability to manage one's behaviors and emotions, hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to sensory stimuli, the inability to adapt to new routines, and the engagement in repetitive and inappropriate social behaviors. Additionally, the abnormalities may play a role in social changes such as difficulties forming relationships, understanding others' perspectives, interpreting and regulating emotions, and recognizing and responding to social cues and conversations. Next, we have the cerebellum. The cerebellum is located in the back of the head in the posterior cranial fossa. The cerebellum is also known as the little brain. This region of the brain regulates the coordination of posture, voluntary movements, and muscle tone. Additionally, it contributes to motor learning. Balance during walking and standing, picking up objects, and timing a movement are all daily activities managed by the cerebellum. The cerebellum is also related to emotional and cognitive functions, including attention, language, decision-making, fear, and pleasure. The cerebellum is the most consistent brain structure found to have an abnormality in those with ASD. Those with ASD have been found to have an irregular sized cerebellum. Some studies found those with ASD have a reduced size of numerous regions of the cerebellum. Additionally, an enlarged cerebellar volume is also correlated to individuals with ASD. An enlargement in cerebellar white matter volume and a reduction in the gray to white matter ratio were also found in those with ASD. These abnormalities in the cerebellum may account for potential symptoms including physical difficulties such as impaired motor skills and repetitive movements, in addition to social and emotional difficulties such as sensitivity to stimuli, an unexpected amount of fear, and difficulties with social interactions. Finally, It also may attribute to cognitive difficulties such as challenges in problem solving and language and cognitive flexibility. Next, we have the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area is one of the two areas responsible for speech within the cerebral cortex. It is typically found on the left side in the Brodmann area 22. Wernicke's area is known for being a language center of the brain, and it plays a major role in speech production. This area is also responsible for phonological retrieval and representation, which supports in sentence comprehension and putting meaning to sounds. Additionally, some researchers have found that Wernicke's area plays a role in language comprehension. Researchers have identified numerous abnormalities in the Wernicke's area in the brains of those with ASD. One abnormality is decreased degree centrality in the left superior temporal gyrus. Additionally, researchers found an increased degree centrality in the left middle temporal gyrus. Finally, those with ASD were found to have weakened functional connectivity between Wernicke's area and the bilateral planum temporal. The abnormality in the Wernicke's area may account for communication and speech-related symptoms such as difficulties with pragmatic language use, interpreting and understand others' speech, communicating with others, and may attribute to those who are nonverbal. Next, we will examine some neurotransmitters that may play a role in ASD. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that regulates essentially all behavioral and numerous other processes in humans. Serotonin plays a role in regulating processes including memory, perception, learning, sleep, appetite and digestion, pain perception, motor control, mood, and emotions including fear, aggression, stress, anger, and sexuality. Researchers have found that children with ASD have higher levels of serotonin. Additionally, there was no decline in serotonin synthesis during puberty as there is in neurotypical adolescents. In adults, researchers have found lower serotonin transporter availability. The abnormalities in serotonin may account for repetitive and compulsive behaviors and unusual sleeping and eating habits that those with ASD experience. Next, we have gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that blocks signals in the central nervous system. GABA is known for producing a calming effect as it reduces neuronal excitability. GABA also plays a role in controlling nerve cell hyperactivity related to anxiety, stress, and fear. Additionally, GABA is believed to also regulate muscle relaxation and sleep. There are abnormalities in GABA found within those with ASD. There is an imbalance between excitatory or glutamate and inhibitory GABA neurotransmission. Additionally, there is an increase of plasma GABA and the glutamate/glutamine ratio. Finally, those with ASD have lower levels of plasma glutamine and glutamate to GABA ratios. The balance between the GABA and the glutamate is necessary for cell membrane stability and neurological function. The abnormalities in GABA may account for emotional symptoms those with ASD experience, such as stress, anxiety, and inappropriately responding to stimuli. Finally, we have the MET gene. The MET gene is located on human chromosome 7. It is responsible for neuron growth and development. Additional findings have also linked this gene to playing a role in immune function and repair in the gastrointestinal system. Those with ASD experience dysregulation in MET signaling. When the MET gene becomes dysregulated in the body, particularly during fetal growth and early childhood, the prefrontal region of the brain is impacted. These impacts cause changes in the prefrontal neurons and disrupts the circuits between these neurons. These changes in this region are largely responsible for the neurological symptoms of ASD. Additionally, the abnormality may account for gastrointestinal and immune difficulties that some with ASD experience. Finally, we look at the lifespan implications and treatments of ASD. ASD can impact individuals in various ways. For one, the average lifespan of an individual with ASD is 39, which is significantly lower compared to a neurotypical individual. There are treatments to help manage the symptoms of ASD. Since ASD symptoms and behaviors vary, treatments and therapies also vary based on what best supports the individual's needs. Potential treatments include intervention programs or tools such as cognitive behavior therapy, behavioral management therapy, early intervention, social skills training, physical therapy, speech-language therapy, occupational therapy, joint attention therapy, nutritional therapy, school-based therapy, and parent-mediated therapy. Research has found that early diagnosis and interventions are most likely to have positive outcomes on managing symptoms and better supporting children with later skills. The earlier educators can identify the symptoms, the faster the diagnosis and intervention process will take place, which will ultimately better prepare the child for their future. Medication is also an optional treatment. Medications for ASD include risperidone and aripiprazole. What scientists know now has greatly evolved from the 1900s. We went from thinking autism was caused by cold mothering to now understanding that various regions of the brain, such as the amygdala, orbitofrontal cortex, cerebellum, and Wernicke's area, all play a role in ASD. Research has also expanded from solely analyzing the brain's involvement in ASD to assessing neurotransmitter and other systems like neurotransmitters such as serotonin and GABA and genes such as the MET gene, and determining how these impact ASD. The abnormalities in these regions and systems can account for the various symptoms those with ASD experience, including social communication impairments and restrictive repetitive behaviors. These regions, neurotransmitters, and genes are only a select few potential reasons individuals have ASD. There are many other hypothesized regions and systems that play a role in ASD. An extensive amount of research is still needed in order to better understand the causes, impacts, and risk factors of ASD. Although researchers have learned much about ASD, there are still so many unanswered questions and inconsistencies within research. It has been a great privilege presenting to this room of educators. As an educator, understanding how autism may affect an individual's behavior can help one be more mindful of how to respond to the individual. For example, a teacher may have a student with autism spectrum disorder that cannot handle routine changes. That teacher would attempt to keep the daily routines the same and prepare that student in advance when there is a shift in the schedule. Understanding that the brain and other systems are responsible for the behaviors associated with ASD reminds educators that students do not have a choice. Finally, being aware of potential symptoms can lead to earlier diagnosis and interventions. I hope you take this learning about ASD with you into your future educational experiences and use your newfound knowledge to best meet the needs of all of your students. Thank you for joining me today as we analyze ASD. In conclusion, while autism spectrum disorder presents with considerable variability among individuals, research has indicated shared neurobiological abnormalities within key brain regions, neurotransmitter systems, and genes such as the amygdala, orbitofrontal cortex, cerebellum, Wernicke's area, serotonin, GABA, and the MET gene, which all contribute to the symptoms linked to ASD. Thank you again.